This is Big Tasty Sports.
Man, it's good to have the NFL back. I can't say that the first week of games was the best week of games I've ever seen, but at least the NFL is back, and we're back to talk some DFS, maybe some player props. Yanni, week one in the books, obviously it didn't go the way that either of us hoped, to be honest, with the Vikings and the Bills both laying some eggs where they shouldn't have, but you recovered and ready for week two, or how are we doing?
Not recovered, but ready for week two, though. Yeah, hoping for a little better. It was it was a pretty good weekend betting wise. So, you take those home team heart losses and, you hope that at least having a little extra money in the pocket is worth it. So it's all good.
Totally. Yeah, man, I had a decent week, not great, but decent. I was up like a 1 point something, which is good. It's better than being down. What about how did DFS go for you week one? Since we're doing DFS, we should talk about that.
Good. I would say the one thing that didn't go the way I had hoped was Sam Howell. I mean, and he had an okay game, but when you're in those bigger contests, you obviously got to hit the big ones, and he didn't do it. And, you're taking a shot when you play a guy at that price point, but had he been able to produce, I mean, all of a sudden the lineups look pretty good. I mean, we had guys like Tyreek Hill pegged and, Aaron Jones, some other guys that really put up big performances. So had Howell been able to do what he did, but that's the fun / frustrating part with DFS. It's like, I'm one piece away when you're in those big contests, but it was a good week overall.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, let's jump in. We're going to go through each of the positions, and as we go, we'll talk stacks and stuff, because obviously if you're talking quarterbacks, you're probably going to be talking stacks some and stuff, but we'll go through different tiers at each position, and then at the end, we'll pick something that's interesting and build out a lineup and hopefully make some money this week as well. So we're going to start at quarterback, and we are going to do $7,000 and up at quarterback. As you look at that top tier, Yanni, some interesting games there. Are there any quarterbacks that you like?
I rarely spend money at the quarterback position just because I feel like you can usually find a bargain. Obviously, as I mentioned, didn't work out with Sam Howell last week, but that's kind of my philosophy. But when I look at that top tier, I think Mahomes is in line for a big game. I mean, Kelsey's going to be back. Or should be back, it looks like. And, against that Jags defense, I think some of those drop passes we saw in their opener, I think they could light that defense up. I mean, he could have a really big game. So I think, you could consider him. Obviously, he's the highest priced quarterback for the week. And then Josh Allen. I mean, we saw the absolute abomination. We just briefly talked about it on Monday Night Football. He's returning home against a mediocre at best Raiders defense. I would anticipate a lot of fantasy points there. So I think you can go right to the top. And then I do think you can consider Justin Herbert again. I mean, we saw he had a pretty nice game against the Dolphins. Not great, but good. Against that Tennessee, I just don't see them running the ball. I think they're going to have to throw. So I think that Herbert's an option as well. But I don't like him quite as much just because I think that could be a little bit more of a grinded out, lower scoring game. So I don't like him quite as much. But if you're going to spend the money, I think Mahomes and Allen both have big weeks.
Yanni, we might be talking football too much. On my QB list in the top tier, I have Mahomes, Allen, Herbert. There you go. And I do, honestly, if it wasn't for Tennessee potentially slowing the game down and reducing the number of plays and possessions, I would like Herbert a lot, because I think that offensive line can at least contend with Tennessee's defensive line. And if they can give Herbert time, he should tear that secondary up. So, but I'm with you. Like, how much lower scoring and slower paced of a game is it than the other ones? And that's where it gets problematic. So I'm with you on Mahomes and Allen, though, and just the big upside for both of those guys this week.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that maybe we don't want to pay as much, though, because I'm actually with you. None of the QBs in that top tier were ones that I am most excited to play, though I've built out some lineups with different ones. Let's look at the next tier, which is 5,500 and up. Who do you like as we drop down another $1,500 here?
I think for me, the guy that I really like this week, and I'm kind of putting a lot of eggs in his basket, is Jared Goff. And, they, I think, can run the football. I mean, we saw it with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think they will run the football. But this is a home game, an opener against a team that really was diced last week with what I would consider very mediocre. I mean, they were diced by lesser players than the Lions, put it that way. So I think Goff has a big game this week. I think he's at 6,200, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 6,200. So I really like him there. And then, I think that for me, that's kind of it in those price points. I mean, I'm kind of looking at Goff in the interior, and there's not a whole lot else that really gets me too excited besides that.
All right. Well, I might get excited too easily because I have a few other things that I like here. But this is why I like doing this too. It was good for me last week. You kind of talk through it and see if it makes sense or maybe not. So Goff certainly makes sense. There's no doubt. Other ones though, and this is as I kind of thought about it more and even started building out some lineups. It makes sense to go to that Chiefs Jaguars game, and of course Mahomes is an attractive target. But man, Trevor Lawrence, I still think he's a really good quarterback. I don't know if it's a great matchup for him, but I think there could be a lot of points in this game. Calvin Ridley certainly broke out when I was looking at ownership projections so far. He's like number 1 or 2 on the board. So you're probably going to struggle with ownership if you go back to Calvin Ridley, but he can get you some of those yards. And I'm just thinking, like, how do I get a piece of this game? And obviously going to the Chiefs is one, but I think there are some good lineups out there with Trevor Lawrence and some good pieces on the Jags you can use. I also, a little bit lower in here, I don't mind Daniel Jones. I mean, yes, he's an average quarterback, but he gets the Cardinals now. And I think he'll probably be low owned because it was so bad last week. And I think people aren't generally high on Daniel Jones. But one of the things I love about him is he does have that rushing upside. Yep. And I know that he doesn't have great targets to throw to, but I think it's just going to be better this week against the Cardinals. And so at $6,000, that was another one I was looking at. Do you have any thoughts on Lawrence or Jones?
I mean, I think Lawrence is definitely playable. On my end, even though my listening skills are not so good when you laid out the numbers there, I have Lawrence in my mind
okay.
in the higher tier.
Okay, nice.
But I guess you could say he's either the highest of the low or the lowest of the high, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, right.
I should have paid closer attention to your rules there. But no, I do like Lawrence here. And I think what you said is true. I don't know that it's a great matchup, but I think it's a good matchup. And to your point, if we think Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to light it up, by default, Lawrence should be able to do something there, whether it's garbage time, whether it's, hey, we got to keep up and score a lot, whatever that looks like. And of course, they have the weapons. So I think Lawrence is definitely playable. And you do save, I mean, in essence, $1,000 to $1,500 compared to, those top tier guys. So I definitely think Lawrence is playable.
Okay. Yeah. And I the question I was just asking myself is if most of the usage is consolidated on Kelsey, which you can debate, do you do okay with Lawrence and some of the Jags pieces and then just running it back with Kelsey? And so you don't get the Mahomes points with Kelsey, but you're picking up the bulk of the Chiefs offense in a sense. On the receiving end was kind of how I was thinking about it.
Yeah. And, Kelsey every year for the last however many years, 3 years, he's always that big question mark because, of course, he's by far the highest priced tight end. So then you start asking yourself, do you want to invest all your money there? But I think if you're playing a scenario like that, if you think the Jags and Chiefs are going to be that, 55-point type game, which they very well could. I think what's the line, 51 right now? It's still sitting at.
Yeah, so, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're thinking this is in the 50s, which it very well could be, I mean, that philosophy is not bad. You stack the Jags and then you go with Kelsey and hope that, all the Chiefs points come from Kelsey, so to speak. So, yeah. I mean, that is definitely a theory you could run with.
All right. Well, let's drop down to the dumpster diving again here. Anything below 5,500 at quarterback that you would have any interest in playing?
I mean, certainly wouldn't be in love with anything, but I think that, there's two that you could at least consider, in my opinion. I think you can believe it or not, and he is not a big fantasy producer. We know that, but Baker Mayfield has to at least be, if you're truly looking for building your lineup around other positions, he's got a favorable matchup. I mean, and, is Mayfield ever going to be the 400-yard, 4-touchdown guy? Probably not, but could you get 230 yards and maybe you luck into 2 or 3 touchdowns with him at that price point? It's a little bit of a risk, but it's certainly not impossible in that matchup. And then I think, You can consider CJ Stroud. I mean, I would not personally play him, but I think you could definitely consider him. I actually like the Texans this weekend. I think, it could be a game where he he does some things. Don't love him. And the one that I think is really intriguing here is Ryan Tannehill. And I think, first of all, if it doesn't end up being that grinded out game, let's say, the Chargers are scoring, maybe they can throw the ball, but I can't personally get behind Tannehill for two reasons. Number one, DeAndre Hopkins hasn't practiced yet this week. So obviously that's a little bit concerning, a weapon potentially out of there. But their offensive line is as bad as we thought that it might be. And if Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and those guys are getting after him, it could be a long day. I mean, Tannehill looked really bad against the Saints. And again, not per se all his fault. He was under constant duress, but that's why I can't get around it. But those would be the guys I'd at least take a look at. I think Mayfield would probably be my top option. Obviously wouldn't feel great about having him as my quarterback, but if you're able to build enough around him, then maybe you take a shot.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think that is the best option. Last week, I didn't mind. Sam Howell, Anthony Richardson was cheaper last week. There were some people to pay down for. This week, I think I'm just out on this bottom tier. There's nowhere that I really want to go there. So, all right. Well, that said, then let's move on to running back. And actually, some of these, I'll switch the prices just a little to try to break it into tiers. But for running back, we're going to do the same thing. So $7,000 and up on running back. Where do you have some interest in that top tier?
I don't know that I love in this week. I'll say this. This was one of the hardest weeks in recent years, not just last year. I mean, in years that I've struggled to really look and say, I got to have that guy on my roster. Usually there's a couple of those guys where they just kind of jump off the page at you. And especially at running back, I didn't have that. I think there's some very potentially good options, but I don't necessarily feel great about them. With that being said, I think that McCaffrey's always in the conversation. I'm personally not going to play him this week. I think his price point and the matchup are just not good enough. Saquon Barkley, because of the matchup, again, Arizona, and they did fairly well last week against Washington, stopping the run. So I don't know that I have a ton of faith in Barkley, but I think when the Giants go back to the drawing board after that beatdown, I think you're going to potentially see a lot of Barkley. And I would say that the next three guys are the ones that I really like, or not really like, but I would be looking at, and that's Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, and Derrick Henry. Pollard, I think on paper you look and they say, oh, they don't have a great matchup against the Jets. But I think there's a few things to think about with Pollard. They're probably going to be up in this game and potentially up big. So we could see some volume from Pollard in terms of that. And that Jets defense is a little bit more geared towards stopping the pass than the run. So they're not bad at run defense, but they're also not elite at run defense. They're just okay. So I think Pollard has the potential for a big game there. And I like Henry just because the Chargers still haven't really proven they can stop the run. They did okay against Miami. Miami didn't really try to run the ball too much because they were throwing all over them. But I think this is a game for me where whether you're high on Derrick Henry and the Titans offensive line or not, this is the type of game where I think Henry could have those big runs. He could be, 100 yards at halftime. So those would really be the guys. And I'm sorry, what cutoff did you say?
7,000. Yeah.
7,000. Okay. So yeah. So, I mean, again, I don't particularly love any of them. So I don't know that I would necessarily roster any of them, but those three would probably be my top choices there.
All right. We're going to take a short break in the action to bring in D Nice.
What's going on?
Jump in. D, what is happening?
What's happening? Hopefully you can hear me.
Oh, we can hear you. We can see your Eagles hat.
I have the Eagles hat since I'm playing your horned team here.
You are. We're recording this on Thursday night right before the game, so it'll be okay.
Fly. Yeah. Hopefully you guys don't go 0-2, but actually I want you to go 0-2 because if you go 0-2, yeah. So I'm sure that you guys have either spoken about that already or we will. So there's plenty of time.
And by the time people hear this, it'll be over.
Yeah. So if we give a wrong prediction, then it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Well, hey man, so we are in the midst of going through running backs right now. We were just talking about the top tier, so $7,000 and up. Yanni talked about what he liked, and Yanni, I'll just say, I agree that I'm not looking to play much out of this tier. I do like Derrick Henry. It feels a little obvious to me. You play running backs against the Chargers, and Derrick Henry is a beast still. And so that just feels a little bit obvious. I think I'm most interested in Derrick Henry, and it could be too chalky. But if I do a Herbert stack with some of the weapons on the Chargers to bring it back with Derrick Henry is something that I would consider doing. But he's the only one I'm really interested in this top tier. I did consider Saquon, like you said, and I think the Giants actually ran the ball well in that first drive until the kick got blocked, and then it was just kind of over, and they weren't going to run it anymore. So I do just wonder, like, hey, maybe they're going to be better at running it than passing it. I don't know. So I thought about that, but I think I'm likely to just stay off of him. So
the one thing I will say is at this point it's early in the season, so a lot of times the name recognition gets overvalued. I mean, people hear Saquon Barkley, he's a well-known player. Does his price tag merit that at this point with, what we've seen? I mean, the second half of last year, he wasn't very good. So I don't know. To me, I look at that next tier, we're going to get to here in a second, and there are guys there that I think are more productive at this point than Saquon Barkley is, even though he has a nice matchup against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I can't argue that. D, 7,000 and up at running back. Anything stick out to you there?
7K or up so far this week. Do I have anybody in that 7K or up territory? I don't have Josh Jacobs in anything. I have a lot in the mid tier at this point. 7K and up. No, so far there's not anything that really tickles my fancy too hard. I'm not playing Tony Pollard. I'm sure that you guys have touched on that also for 7,500. And he's playing a stout Jets D. So I've gone more in the middle range overall so far.
Well, let's go to the middle range. So
let's do it.
Next tier that we're doing is 5,500 and up. So D, let's stick with you. 5,500 and up at running back. What are the places you're looking to go?
So far, I've looked at James Cook on the Bills. I think he has a ton of talent. And, I mean, he's playing at the Raiders. We know that the Raiders aren't good. He's not playing the Jets anymore. And he's priced at $6,100. So he's slid into a few of my lineups thus far. I also have Kenneth Walker in quite a few. And remind me what he's priced at, $5,800. So he's in that tier as well. I'm not huge on this Seahawks team, but I think it's a pretty high-scoring game, and I think he should get you pretty good value at that price. I personally would rather play the over in the game overall, but this is not talking about sports bets. We're talking about some value here. So Walker at 5,800, I do like. Who else did I have in that mid-tier? That is lower tier. Jamal Williams as well. So I told you guys about him last week. I took him. I should have respected the Titans D a bit more. I'm probably going to roll him back again this week on the Saints because we don't have Kamara back for another, is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? I think he comes back week 4.
Week 4.
Yeah, week 4.
4. So I do like Jamal there. I mean, he's priced at $5,400, which might be below your cap. I'm a bad listener.
Yanni did that earlier too.
Me too.
I don't remember what my cutoff
let's
was.
call it 5,400 and we'll slide into that mid-tier range. So those are the guys that I like. And I actually misspoke. I do like, and I haven't put him into too many lineups, I do like Christian McCaffrey. He's priced really high, but this guy's going to get so many damn touches that if you wanted to structure a lineup with him, I wouldn't fault you for it. So I know I'm all over the place, and I went high end and then I went below your tier there, but that's currently how I'm looking at the running back market.
Yanni, how about you in this middle tier, which once again, just to remind you, is $5,500, 5,500.
Okay.
And up. I'm just playing.
We need the reminder.
Not 54.
Not 54.
Yeah, I should probably type that on the screen.
33.
There's too much happening. I've got computers. I've got people texting me about who they should bet on tonight. I'm like, I don't know, man. Just figure it out yourself. Sorry.
Yanni, what do you think?
Yeah, I first of all, I really like James Cook this week also. I think that he potentially is going to have a really big game here. So I think he's definitely playable. AJ Dillon is a guy that I think you can take a look at here. It looks like Aaron Jones, he hasn't practiced yet, so I don't know that he's going to go. If he doesn't go, to me, A.J. Dillon is probably a must start at that point. The Packers are going to try to funnel that offense around him if Jones doesn't go. So you may have to wait on that one, but I think he's definitely a guy you can keep your eye on. And then, we saw last week, Tyler Algier. It's obviously Robinson. We know he's going to get a lot of work and he's good, but we saw Algier got 15 carries last week. And, he's involved. So for $5,500, if you're looking there, the only thing obviously is when you get to guys like Algier versus say like James Cook, James Cook's going to get carries. Algier, obviously, it's a little more of a toss up there. And of course, that's a little questionable if you put him in. Lastly, both of the Lions guys, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, again, favorable matchup against the Seahawks, who have not proven they can really stop the run. I like Gibbs, but obviously he only got 27% snap count in that opener. I would anticipate that number goes up a lot, but I don't know that for sure. Montgomery could be your guy for at least another week here, but it's kind of that same thing as Algier there where, do you feel comfortable if putting one guy in if the other guy ends up getting the totes? So for me, it's kind of like James Cook and then potentially A.J. Dillon if Aaron Jones is not in the lineup.
Yeah, I'm going to start where you finished, Yanni, and that's with the Lions running backs. And I agree with you that it's really hard to know what's going to happen, but I think this is where in DFS, especially if I'm playing multiple lineups, if I'm only playing one, I actually probably don't go to either one of them. Right. But I think the upside on Jahmyr Gibbs is just so significant that it's hard for me to ignore him completely at this price point. And, Dan Campbell says he's going to play more, but that probably doesn't mean anything. But, I'm going to try it against the Seahawks probably in at least like a couple of my lineups. And then I'm with you guys as well. Before the season, thought this could be a big year for James Cook, and it's been one game, so it's not obvious that it will be yet. But, man, he looks super talented, really dynamic. So I'm excited to see what he can do against the Raiders this week as well. So I think that's a great spot to go to with James Cook. So let's dumpster dive on the running backs. The whole board, all the way down. Yanni, is there anything you would pull out of the trash can and say, I'll put it in my lineup?
I mean, there's not a ton there. I think Rachaad White, who's actually at that 5,500 mark, is potentially an option just because of the matchup. But I think what you can look at here, and I realize it's going to be a tough matchup, but I think that Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are going to get some run in Baltimore, obviously with Dobbins out. It seems like Justice Hill probably has a little more upside. Edwards is a little bit more kind of that 3-yard a carry plotter there. He gets some of the goal line work. But I think those guys you could at least consider at the price point. Hill's at 4,900 there. Edwards is at 53. So, there's options there. And then I think if you go a little bit further, if he's healthy, which I don't know if he's going to play at this point, but Zach Moss getting a shot in Indy against Houston. I mean, they put Deion Jackson out there last week. He did nothing. So Moss is going to be the clear number one guy when he's back. Not that he's great, but he's got a pretty favorable matchup there. Could get a lot of carries. So when you look at his price point, which he is 4,700, I think you can look at there. And then the last guy I would really look at for me is Jerick McKinnon. And McKinnon's always hit or miss, right? He's the kind of guy that he has big weeks and then other weeks he's barely involved. He barely sees the ball. But if we're again that Chiefs-Jags game being a little bit of a shootout and throwing the ball around, I would anticipate that McKinnon gets some playing time in that game. And this seems like that wide open type game where he might catch 5 or 6 passes and get in the end zone once or twice. So I think that those are kind of the lower end guys that you could put in your lineup and take a shot with.
D, how about you? Any dumpster diving in the, not in real life, but in running back DFS?
Try not to do that too much in real life, but sometimes some of the desperate times call for desperate measures. No, I like the call on Zach Moss. I'll probably structure him into a few of the lineups. I think that the Colts could be kind of sneaky. It's like, I don't think that they're a good team, but I could see myself saying, okay, Steichen's a pretty good OC. He's a pretty good head coach now. Like, they could be that kind of tricky 4 to 5 win team, and you could have some pretty good players. So Zach Moss, because the Houston Texans are really not good. And then I skip.
Uh-oh. I'm going to jump in while he hopefully refreshes. I
Great.
think first of all, you've got to see if Moss is healthy, right, before you put him in. I mean, you got to make sure he's playing, which I don't think is a slam dunk, although it looks like maybe he's trending that way. But I think also, and this goes without saying, when we get to the dumpster diving here, you got to temper expectations a little bit, right? I mean, we're not looking for Zach Moss to put up 150 and 3 touchdowns. He's not going to put up a Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey stat line. You're hoping you can get 60 yards and a touchdown out of a guy like that, in a game like that. So it looks like D's back now.
Totally. Welcome back, D. Carry on.
Zach Moss and Jamal Williams, I think, are pretty good tags here. I skipped the rules earlier and I said that I'd play Williams at $5,400. Your threshold was $5,500. Technically not a dumpster dive, but it's that mid-tier range. So I do like him as well.
It's like close to expiring, but not in the dumpster.
It's close to expiring. It's not full. It's kind of like on the edge of the dumpster, right?
Right. It's getting there. So yeah, for me, Zach Moss is who I had written down. Well, one of the ones. The other two are also injury dependent that I think are worth watching. One is Joshua Kelly with the Chargers. Eckler hasn't practiced. Today's Thursday. He didn't practice again today. So he probably gets out there. But if he doesn't, I mean, Joshua Kelly looked pretty good last week. And so I think at $5,000, that's a great value if Eckler ends up not playing. Yeah. The other one is Keontae Ingram at $4,300. Connor has an injury designation. And really, that's just he's 4,300, and if Connor's not out there, he's going to get the ball some. Yanni, to your point, the expectations would be you hope that he gets like 40 yards and a touchdown, if you're really lucky. So it's not big, but at $4,300, you don't need it to be big either. So those are my dumpster guys are injury ones to watch more than anything. So, all right, let's move on to wide receiver, which is a fun one. We'll start again with $7,000 and up. Yanni, what do you like at wide receiver in that top tier?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stephon Diggs should have another nice game, but obviously he's the highest price there. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously, I mentioned Jared Goff. I think stacking him, he's a good option against that Seahawks defense. They're a little more. They funnel their offense outside, their defense outside in Seattle. Amon-Ra plays a lot in the slot, which I think would help him in this matchup to potentially, be a good target there. And then, obviously we saw Calvin Ridley and what he did. So, I think that, to me, that's going to be indicative of what he does all year if he's healthy. I think he's going to be in that 100-yard, touchdown club pretty much every week. And against the Chiefs, knowing, again, they're probably going to need to score points. Hard to argue with putting Ridley in there.
Yeah, he was a beast, man. It was fun to watch him.
Yeah,
just dominating. It wasn't really good for Christian Kirk. Yeah. We'll say that, but it was good for Calvin Ridley and good for the Jags. So, D, how about you? 7,000 and up. You have receivers you're interested in this week?
7K and up. I've got St. Brown for sure. It should be a pretty high scoring game. I don't think that the Seahawks D is too good at all. So I have him structured in quite a bit. Calvin Ridley is on my list as well. Chiefs D, it's at Jags, right? So he should have plenty of targets. I think that Calvin Ridley had 12 targets. I mean, he's just going to have a hell of a year. Probably should have never been suspended, guys. Honestly, he just threw in a few bets, right? It's not the end of the world.
He did what we're doing. Come on.
Yeah, right. Dude, he's probably playing DFS. He's probably still fucking betting on himself. But anyways, so I have him. Tyreek Hill, hard to pass on him. It's easy to pass if you don't want to spend too much, but how many yards and how many targets did that guy have last week? I mean, just a huge performance. He's not a value play, but if he goes for another 2 touchdowns, 10 catches, and 250 yards, then all of a sudden he can be pretty damn good value. So those are all in the category of 7K plus for me at this point.
All right. So I'm with you guys on Amon-Ra and Ridley. I like, as you said, Amon-Ra out of the slot in particular in this matchup. And then, Ridley. There are two other ones I'm interested in, though. One is Keenan Allen. And I was high on Mike Williams and not Keenan Allen going into the last game. We only have a 1-game sample size, but Justin Herbert dropped back 46 times. And Keenan Allen was out there for 45 of those. Mike Williams was 35. Joshua Palmer wasn't far behind at 32. On the pass plays. So it seems like Keenan Allen, as long as he stays healthy, is going to maintain sort of that number one receiver role. And so especially if you're going to stack up Herbert, I know that he's in the top tier, but I think Keenan Allen might be worth it in this case. So I think it's worth consideration. The other one is DK Metcalf. I mean, he's $7,000. He's super talented in a game where Seattle's going to have to throw the ball, and they're down both of their tackles, so maybe Geno just gets sacked every play. But if they're able to throw the ball at all, I mean, DK is a top-tier receiver. So at the bottom of this tier, I don't mind considering him as well. Would be my other one in the top. So any thoughts on Keenan Allen? I'm actually interested in if you guys have any thoughts on Keenan Allen.
He's been a great PPR guy, and he will, I think, continue to be. I do think it's really interesting what you pointed out, how much he outsnapped Williams. And I think obviously there's a comfort in whatever. And I think Williams has always been a little bit more of the home run hitter versus Allen a little bit more of the possession guy. But I found it interesting, if you watched some of that game, he was getting downfield. I mean, Herbert was throwing him the ball downfield. So it wasn't just crossing routes and, little outs and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. But when you talk about stacking, I think with the price point, you could, if you want Herbert, you can absolutely put Allen and Williams in there. Obviously, we didn't get a ton of production from Williams last week, but at some point, that's the thing. Is it going to be this week? Is it going to be the next week? I mean, he's going to have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns at some point. When is it? I think Allen is definitely the more consistent option between the two at this point. But maybe a little more potential upside with Williams there. So it's kind of your high risk, high reward there.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's drop down to 5,500 and up. We're actually going to do 4 tiers with receiver, just getting you ready for that. But we will do 5,500 and up again here. D, as we drop down one more tier, are there some other receivers you like?
5,500 and up. I'll try to play by the rules here. I do
Thank
like
you.
T. Higgins. I'll try to play by rules. I do like T. Higgins. I know that the Bengals didn't look good last week, but look, they looked bad the first 2 weeks of last year. You have the Burrow injury. For some reason, they always seem to play down to the Browns. So you can't read too much into that. It's only week 1. I like him at $6,400. I don't like him enough to have him in too many lineups so far, but he's like on that cusp. I'm like, I should probably try to work him into more. Who else do I have in there? I have Debo, and that's not playing by your rules because he was,
he's 56.
Yeah. Okay. See,
you're doing it.
I'm starting to get the hang of this. I like Debo overall, obviously. I mean, he's a pretty damn good player. I don't know what to make of the Rams. Like, they have a whole completely new fucking roster, but like at the same time, I'm like, they don't look that bad, and they didn't look too bad last week. I think that he gets involved. If you want a sneaky stack, you could go Purdy and Debo. And other than that, I have a bunch of guys below that 5,500 range. I need to get T. Higgins involved more, though, because I think that they will break out of this in a big way. I'm just hoping it's not in week 3. If they're playing the Ravens, they have to put it together, because you don't want to start 0-2 and go a loss against, or will that be 0-2 in the AFC North, right? So you don't want that to happen. So T. Higgins needs to work his way in for sure.
Yanni, you're up.
I think you're right on Higgins in the sense that, I mean, we're not going to see another goose egg from him. They're going to try to get him the ball. But how much you trust him, and that's kind of an individual decision. I think the guy, and you mentioned Debo, but I think Brandon Aiyuk is at this price point a must start. I mean, in essence, his production with Brock Purdy has been almost as good as the top 3 or 4 receivers in the league. He's been just below that. And he's really, again, he's not priced like that. I mean, he's priced below guys who maybe have bigger names but aren't anywhere near as productive as he's been with Brock Purdy. So as long as Purdy's there, I'm looking at Aiyuk. He's under $6,000. I think you got to get him in the lineup. And then, I mentioned Josh Allen and Diggs. I think Gabe Davis is a good play this weekend. He only had a few catches Monday night. I think he had 32 or 35 yards. But this is the type of game where Gabe Davis excels. And I think, this could be that type of game for him where, he has 100 yards and gets in the end zone and that kind of thing. So Aiyuk and Davis, I think at this tier, you can consider the Bucs guys, Evans and Godwin. I mean, they have favorable matchups. But sometimes with them, it's like, do they score enough points? Do you trust if you pick Evans that it's not going to be a Godwin day, or if you pick Godwin, it's not going to be an Evans day? I don't, unless you're stacking Mayfield like we talked about, which I can't get behind. I'm probably passing on the Bucs. So I'm looking at Aiyuk and Gabe Davis.
Well, guys, we're largely lining up again. Number one in this tier for me was Aiyuk. I agree. Like, he's just way more talented than his price point at this point.
Yeah, I totally missed him. He's at $5,800, and I totally missed that he was priced there. I need to work him in for sure. He's so damn good.
And D, like you had said, the sneaky 49er stack. I didn't bring up Purdy when we talk quarterbacks, but I kind of am interested in Purdy, Aiyuk, Debo as a stack. I mean, you get two relatively low price guys, and with Debo, he wasn't super involved last week, and I think sometimes they just make more of a point to get him the ball then, even on some runs and stuff. So I don't mind those three as a stack. And then I also had Gabe Davis. He was my number 2 in this range, and then Mike Williams, who we already talked about, especially if you're stacking up the Chargers, was my 3rd. So lining up overall. And now we get to go to the bonus tier before we dumpster dive, which, guys, get ready for this. It's $4,000 and up. And Yanni, I believe you are up in this.
And you don't consider that dumpster diving.
Not yet, man.
4,000 is pretty damn low, but you have a bunch of options.
Yeah. I got a few below 4,000, so we'll see how crazy it is.
Well, I think, when I look at here, if I'm looking, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, obviously, but I think, sorry, tell me one more time, 4,000 to
4,000 and up.
4,000
to 5,500 or 5,500.
Yeah, 5,400. Okay. Yeah, I like Jahan Dotson again. Didn't have a big week 1, but had an okay week 1. I think Terry McLaurin's going to get a lot of Patrick Surtain in that game, which means Dotson's going to have a little bit more of a favorable matchup. He's at 4,900. So I think you can look at him. I'm not giving up just yet on Kadarius Toney. I will say this. I'm not playing him. I get it. But I'm telling you, like, one of these weeks. So
it's hard to play worse. It's actually impossible to play worse.
That's true.
And he had a role in the Super Bowl, so like he can play. It's just a matter of it wasn't happening, and he got in his own head.
But let's move on before anyone throws tomatoes here. I think if DeAndre Hopkins is out, Treylon Burks is an interesting play at that point. Although he's kind of coming off his own little injury, so you got to watch that. But really, an interesting guy here, I think, is Darius Slayton. He often is the forgotten guy in that Giants passing attack, but he's kind of they've got quite a bit of speed, but he's kind of the game breaker guy that makes those plays. Matchup. I think that Cardinals corner position is not good. I think this is the type of game where, Slayton could make some big plays.
D, 4,000 and up. How about you?
4,000 to 5,500, right?
You got it.
I have George Pickens in a couple of lineups. It's not the best matchup that they have playing the Browns, but you have Deontay Johnson out, so that helps there. Priced at $5,100. I had him in some lineups last week, didn't go too well. I think he had like 3 catches for like 28 yards, but the Steelers just hit the Niners and it was a buzzsaw. Like they just didn't have a chance in that game. And I do have Pickens in there. 4,000, 5,500. A name that I forgot to mention earlier, because I'm getting the hang of this, is actually above that range. So I'm not going to say his name, but I am going to say his name's Hopkins at 6,700. I should have said it 10 minutes ago, but he actually had 13 targets last week. Hey, it's my first time doing this. I'm still, I'm still a little bit rusty. And then you could sell me you could sell me on Amari Cooper at $4,700. He's not currently in like any more but one of my lineups. He's playing the Steelers. The Steelers showed that they could lay a turd. He's not the, sexiest pick out there, but you could be worse at his price point. But of all those guys, I do like Pickens. He'll have targets. I'm hoping he gets like 10 to 12. And he's priced pretty fair at $5K.
Yeah, I can't hate on that one. I mean, I don't like the matchup for sure, but they're going to have to look somewhere, and he's definitely got the talent to be able to come through. So at that price, it's almost like that thing again of, you take if you got a number of lineups, you take a shot or two, I think, with it. So I didn't have him written down, but
at the end of the
I don't
day,
mind
right?
the case for him though.
Yeah.
All right. So my guys in this range, Jahan Dotson was one I had. Yanni, you mentioned him, and I like him. But then I have three other ones. So the first one is Zay Flowers. Man, it looks like Baltimore wants to get him the ball. Yeah. And he had did he have 10 touches last week or something? I'd have to look. He had a lot. And so I think that at $5,000, we're still getting a big discount over where he's going to be in 4 or 5 weeks, especially if this continues. So I don't mind going to him. And then Zay Jones is another one, especially if you're stacking up the Jaguars. Zay Jones actually was second in pass routes run and well over Christian Kirk by 15 or something. And so he's a lot cheaper option than Calvin Ridley. And I think one thing you could do to even pivot off of Calvin Ridley is play Zay Jones and Evan Ingram or something like that. And then if Calvin Ridley doesn't go off, you're looking good while you're still on the Jags. And then my last one is MVS. So Kelsey's going to be back, and we know Mahomes will go to Kelsey a lot. But when you look at the pass routes run there, MVS was the highest of the wide receivers at 35. And then Sky Moore was after that at 31, but Sky Moore didn't have a very good game. And then you drop down to all the other guys after that. So I think if you want to use a wide receiver on Kansas City, it's not super sexy, but I think MVS is the one that I would look at if I was going to use a Kansas City wide receiver in this tier. So any thoughts on any of those? Yanni, I'd be interested even in your thoughts on George Pickens, Flowers, Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys kind of hit him. I mean, Pickens, obviously, with the injury to Johnson, becomes a very, I think they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. Is it going to be Allen Robinson? Maybe. But I mean, Pickens obviously should get the majority of those. I think you're right on the money with Zay Flowers. I mean, you're right. I think by midseason, he's going to be going for 6,000 plus, whatever for his salary. So you are right. I think we're getting a discount here at this point. I'd like to see a little bit more, but I definitely think there's so much upside there. And we saw a glimpse of it in week 1 because he was so heavily targeted that I think you're right. There's some value there for sure.
D, any other thoughts for you on Flowers or Jones, MVS, any of that stuff? Or
so I like Flowers. I don't have MVS in there at all, but that's a pretty good thought. I should probably structure him in. Flowers has a ton of upside this year. So yeah, have Adam at that price for sure.
I agree. I wish I had Adam more last week at $4,000.
Right. Me and you both. But now the price is increasing slowly but surely.
We might go up $1,000 a week at the current rate.
And he could be at like 6,500 in a couple of weeks. But the Jags are dangerous, man, and it's hard to go wrong.
Well, I hate to make you do this again, D, but dumpster dive. If you go below 4,000, is there anybody you think about putting in a lineup?
There's really not that many people in there. Like, I'm not going to do Hunter Renfrow at $3,900. Like, that guy's just a disaster right now, and he's probably going to get traded. I really don't have much in that category, so I'm not going to bring too much to the table here. So
that's okay. You don't have to.
It's all you.
I have
because
nobody in my bottom QB tier.
I need to find more guys here because that's how you can win some tournaments. Like if you can hit a guy at like $3,000 and he can have 2 catches for even like 40 yards and oh my God, if he gets a touchdown, then you're set because your salary is just so that's it.
For sure. Yanni, well, how about you? Anything below 4,000 you have interest in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously nothing great here, but I think Tyler Boyd, kind of a forgotten, quiet guy there, but he has been a Ravens killer in his career. He's absolutely owned them. I think he should catch a few passes this week, and you never know. So to D's point, maybe you get a touchdown there. The guy that I actually think is interesting, going a little bit against the MVS there is Rashee Rice for Kansas City there. He looked like the best receiver out there for the Chiefs. Not that that was saying much in that debacle, but I mean, I think what we're going to see, and it may not be this week, so I don't know necessarily that this week is the week to play, but I think we're going to see this guy get more and more targets as the season goes on, as the team and Mahomes trust him more. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, he could end up being their wide receiver one when it's all said and done. You never know. I don't think he's there yet, so I might be a little hesitant. I think you mentioned the snap share was pretty low for all those other guys behind MVS, but I think he's definitely a guy you can at least keep an eye on. And then the other guy who I think there's two others that you can look at here. Josh Reynolds is one. Until Jamison Williams comes back, Reynolds is getting a lot of work. And Goff likes him. He's known him for years. He trusts him. And I've already talked about how I love Goff and I love the Lions offense here. Josh Reynolds to me is definitely in the mix to get in, especially if you're playing Goff. And lastly, and I hate to say this because I feel like I've mentioned like three Titans and their offense is terrible, but Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, if DeAndre Hopkins doesn't go, if Treylon Burks is still banged up, he's going to be the beneficiary of all that. And I mean, by default, he's going to get some targets. He's going to get some catches, et cetera. So those are kind of the guys at the bottom of the barrel there. If you need to, fill out your roster with $3,300 or $3,800, those are the guys I'd be looking at.
I have three guys I starred, but Rashee Rice was one that I was thinking about. And the main reason that I didn't make him one of my top three is just, I'm not sure, like D was talking about having that touchdown upside and stuff. I'm not sure if I feel like he has that as much as some of the other guys here, but I agree with you that he's a good place to look. So for me, it's Jalen Hyatt on the Giants. I know that he didn't have as many snaps, but who knows after that Cowboys game, and he's got that big playability. I mean, this is a guy who literally could hit one pass for 50 yards and a touchdown at $3,900 and you're good. So I think they'll try to get him the ball some this week. I'm not saying he's going to get a ton of targets, but if he can get 4 targets, you could be good. And then the other two, another one is Tank Dell. They've said they want to get him more involved, and he's another one where if he gets involved, it's probably big plays. So again, I'm kind of going boom or bust here at the bottom with the Texans. And then my last one is Josh Downs on the Colts. It seemed like Richardson really liked him and was looking for him to get him the ball. So at 3,400, I think you could actually get a decent number of catches out of Downs, and it's such a cheap price point. So those are the three that I've got marked down to look at if I need somebody cheap. Any thoughts on any of those that you would be interested in or no?
I think Hyatt's a really interesting play just because, like you said, I think he's got so much of that home run ability. And I do think with the matchup, we could see some work from him this week. So I think that's an interesting play. He's the kind of guy I'm guessing this whole year, though, is going to be boom or bust. So, if you put him in your lineup and you end up with 1 point, 0 points, whatever, like you're going to have to be like, hey, I tried and it didn't work. You have to be comfortable doing that. To your point, though, catches a couple big passes, he could end up with 20 points. You just don't know.
Yep. D, any thoughts for you, or you good?
I agree. I'm good. I was half listening the past 3 minutes because I was placing some last minute prop bets before the Eagles kick off, but I agree.
We don't have much time.
All of the dumpster dives. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Speaking of which, we have 12 minutes to wrap this up. So D, let's go to tight end, $4,000 and up. Anything you like?
$4,000 and up. So Travis Kelce's back, but I'm not going to spend the $7,600 on Travis Kelce because I don't know how his knee will look. But if you want to look at him, I'm sure if he plays in the game, he's good enough to play. And Mahomes, he needs people to go to. But unless you really have the cash to spend in your lineup, probably don't go there. I like TJ Hawkinson, but that's a Thursday night game, and we're talking about Sunday, but this entire year, he should be a guy that Kirk Cousins trusts. I hope that Kirk Cousins sucks tonight and he turns the ball over 3 times. But I like TJ Hawkinson quite a bit. Goddard plays on Sunday also. I've structured in – who else have I put in? I've got Hunter Henry in quite a few actually, but that's above $4,000 because I think that Colt McCoy has only so many places to go. And that's about it at this point. The other guys are like injury prone. Like I've got Kittle in one right now, but do you guys like Kittle this week? Like that guy kind of seems like he's just always banged up and hurt. But you could do like a Kittle and Purdy stack. So curious to hear your thoughts on that one also for Kittle.
I mean, I'll jump in on that real quick. I can't get on the Kittle bandwagon with fantasy, and it's not because I don't think he's a great player, because I think he is. There's just simply not enough to go around, and he isn't generally the focal point of that offense. So he kind of gets the scraps of what's left over, I feel like. And with Aiyuk and Samuel and McCaffrey, there isn't a lot there for him. That's my take on Kittle. I think kind of like we were talking about with Saquon Barkley, you get a little bit of name, fame, celebrity recognition, but the production doesn't match it.
Yep, agreed. Yanni, anybody else above 4,000 that you want to work in?
I mean, I'm tempted to play Kittle. I think he's going to have a huge game, but again, at the same time, at that price point, you got to be sure. So I think you mentioned him earlier. Evan Ingram is a guy who I think is going to have a pretty big game this week. We kind of talked about that, and you said, hey, maybe if you don't play Ridley, you play a guy like Ingram. I mean, at his price point, he's got a pretty high floor and ceiling, in my opinion. I mean, he's going to catch a few passes, and he could catch a lot. So I think when you look at the price point, you could consider him.
Yep. I'll do Kelsey if I stack the Chiefs. Waller is another one I'll look at if he's healthy, especially. And then Ingram was the other one that I had well in that top tier. Let's as I speed things up here with the
Waller's
clock ticking down.
Healthy,
let's go under $4,000. Yanni, what do you like under 4,000 at tight end?
Sam Laporta's a guy. We saw him a little bit on the opener there, and he looks like he's going to be a player. And I've mentioned it 3 times on this video here. I think the Lions are going to put up points. So I think Laporta's a guy. If you're going to play golf, if you're going to play Lions, you could put him in. He's at 3,900. And then I like my guy Dalton Kincaid. He's at 3,300. He got quite a bit of snap run in the opener, and he's going to have a little easier go of it against that middle of the Raiders defense. So I think in that game, he's a guy that could catch a lot of passes. So those are kind of the guys I would be looking. Do we have one? Is this our last tier, or do we have another one?
Yeah, this is it, all the way to the bottom.
So the only other one that I think is interesting is Adam Troutman for the Broncos here. Greg Dulcich left. He's not going to play this week. And this is a game where I think tight ends are going to get some run here. Troutman has familiarity in Sean Payton's offense here. Russell Wilson likes to throw to the tight end. I think Troutman is a guy, I think he's 3,000. So, he comes with, I think, some decent potential upside, decent floor again at 3,000.
D, what else do you like at tight end on the bottom half?
On the bottom half, I didn't follow rules again, but I already said Hunter Henry. I like him, priced at $3,800. It looks like he should get 5 to 8 targets or so. Is pretty good against the Eagles last week. I like Kincaid quite a bit at that price point. I can't argue with Yanni at all. Something that I was shocked to see, and I wonder if I'll put him into lineups, is Zach Ertz. He had 10 targets last week.
Wow.
But he had 6 catches, I think, for 21 yards, which is hard to do. Yeah. Yep, it's Arizona Cardinals. It's just those short routes.
He dropped one. He dropped one in the end zone. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he had one hit him in the hands in the end zone. He didn't bring it in.
So he did have 10 targets. You could do worse. He's healthy-ish. He tore his ACL, and I thought that he could be done, but he's back. So I'll probably get Ertz into a couple of lineups as well. Kincaid, hard to argue, man. I mean, that guy should be a stud at that price point. You could slot him in and pay just over $3,000, and then you have a ton of cash to work with. So I really like that Kincaid call for sure.
I'll pile on that, D. Kincaid is one of my favorite tight ends this week.
100%.
To me, it feels sort of like the Zay Flowers thing or Brandon Aiyuk of like, this is just way lower priced than what he should be, and he's not going to be there for long. So I want to use him while he's that cheap. I do like Laporta as well. He was another one I had starred. And then if you want to go all the way down, I'll just go down to the bottom for fun. Granson on the Colts too. He had a number of catches last week. Another guy that looked like Anthony Richardson was looking for. So I'm not pumped about him. But if you want to get really cheap and you need something,
it's really cheap at $3K. And he had what?
Exactly.
He had 6 targets last week, 4 catches for 39 yards. You could do a lot worse at $3,000, man. If he can do that again, definitely.
I'd say if you have your favorite lineup you've ever made and you have $3,000 left and you need a tight end, just go ahead. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, he's playing a crappy team too. Like Houston's gonna allow targets to this guy. He's 100% gonna allow. Yeah.
Yep, totally.
That's good.
All right. Well, let's get to the defense, and we're just gonna take the whole defense and special teams. No tiers. There's no rules now that we're to the defense. Yanni, you have the whole board open to you.
For me, is just no rules because I'm struggling with the structures. I need to write down my spreadsheet a little bit better next time.
Right. Yanni, you got to fit a defense in. What are you going to do?
If you've got some money, and I realize it may seem like we're chasing the points here, but that Cowboys defense, I mean, they should feast in that game.
They look good.
They get turnovers too.
I know. So, it obviously expensive. They're $4,000, but I mean, if you're ever going to spend at the defensive, I mean, this could be the time to do it there. When you drop down a little bit lower, it gets a little trickier down there, but I think that, when I look here, I don't hate the Ravens defense. If you need to go a little cheaper here, they looked pretty good. I understand they were playing the Texans. It's going to be a little different story with the Bengals, but I think they might be able to get some pressure on Burrow there. So, I mean, I think that's an area that you can look, and believe it or not, I don't hate the Falcons defense here or the Packers. I mean, I think both of those teams, that could be maybe a lower scoring game on the weekend, maybe a little bit more of a defensive battle. So, I mean, I think you could look those routes. And lastly, at 3,200, I think the Bucks. And obviously, you guys know I'm not a Justin Fields guy. I'm not a Bears guy. I think Tampa Bay at home, the defense is still good. It really is. They've still got players on that defense. So I think, they can sack Justin Fields. They can get takeaways. I think Tampa Bay is an option at 3,200.
D, how about you when you go to defense?
If I go to defense, hard to argue. I mean, if you have room for it, the Cowboys, and they should get turnovers, because guess what? They're not playing Aaron Rodgers. They're playing Zach Wilson. And I currently can't see you guys. Hopefully I'm not spinning and freezing, but hopefully you can still hear me. I like the Cowboys, but obviously you don't want to spend $4K every time. Tampa Bay's made it into quite a few of my lineups so far. While the Bears have a pretty elusive quarterback in Fields, I don't think they're a good overall team, a good overall offense, and you could get plenty of turnovers as well. I like Tampa, and Tampa's kind of one of those teams that, like, I don't think they're good, but I think that they're going to sneak around in games, stay in games. They have, some pretty damn good players, and they have some older players, but some stout players on that D. It's funny that Yanni said Ravens, because I've been looking at that one and just saying over and over again and saying, I know what the Bengals did last year, and it took them 2 to 3 weeks to start humming. Should I take a look at the Ravens because of how poorly they did? They haven't made it into a lot of my lineups so far, but that's a really interesting one. And then lastly, if you really want to scrape it, if you think the Cardinals turn the ball over quite a bit, play the Giants. I mean, it's a pretty good matchup, and I think that the Giants are priced pretty fairly. Oh no, it's at $3,800, so it's a little bit higher. But if you think the Cardinals keep on turning the ball over, and Zach Ertz has 10 targets for only 20 yards, and he coughs a few up, then you could do worse than playing a defense playing the worst team in the NFL.
There's always that for sure. So I right now have my defensive usage on 2 teams. It's the Cowboys and it's the Raiders for me. The Raiders are the very bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, as Yanni and I were talking about before we came on, cannot protect the ball sometimes. I expect the Bills to just destroy the Raiders, but that doesn't mean they're not going to turn the ball over at all. And at a cheap price, I'd be willing, if I need it to get people in, I'd be willing to roll the dice.
$2,200, right? That's actually pretty good.
They're the cheapest defense on the board. So
that's probably a good call. Yeah.
Max Crosby can feast against the right tackle of the Buffalo Bills. I'll just say
there you go.
Yeah, but the Bills are turning the ball over more to Yanni's liking. I know that it just kind of seems like if that happens again, and there's enough reason to think that will continue to happen at $2,200, I really like that call, dude.
Yeah, those are my two. All right. Hey, since we're running out of time, usually we build a lineup to finish. But what I did is I took what I've listened. I've tried to listen.
That's
and I
not
put
something
together
I'm
a
good
lineup.
at doing.
Exactly, but I've been trying to do it. I'm going to tell you a lineup based on what I've heard, and you guys tell me which parts of this you would change out. Okay.
That's fair.
So I went with that Purdy Debo Aiyuk stack to start that we talked about just for fun because it's one of the things we talked about. Then I've got Cook and Gibbs at the running backs. High upside, I think, on both of them.
Yep,
we're going heavy on. Yep, we're going heavy on the Bills. So we've got Gabe Davis and Dalton Kincaid. Then at the flex, you have Derrick Henry, and you have the Cowboys defense.
I like
and you
it.
have $0.
That has
left.
a lot of high upside. I mean, you're paying up to have the Cowboys D, but the Jets could be turning the ball over, and they looked electric. I mean, they're not going to do that every week, but I like that. And if you're trying to do high upside, you've got 3 Niners in there, and they're all priced pretty fairly. And if they put up like a 41 spot against the Rams, which is totally doable, hopefully you sneak in like 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to come down. I feel like it's going to come down to Gibbs and Cook, to be honest with you. And,
right, totally.
But again, high upside, I think, for both of those guys. So if they're able to perform, and to a lesser extent, Deebo Samuel, we got to get some production out of him. He's since he hasn't been the running back kind of featured type player, he hasn't been quite as productive. So I think Gibbs, Cook, Samuel, if those guys produce, I feel like the rest of the lineup is pretty solid. We're going to get some points out of the rest of the guys there. So I like it. I think that's interesting. I mean, having Henry at the flex, I think, is good. And again, if you're ever going to spend money on defense, the Cowboys against Zach Wilson at their home opener might be the time to do it.
Poor Jets fans, guys. Poor Jets fans.
Yeah.
Well, I don't feel too bad, but
I don't really give a shit, actually. But yeah, it's probably a tough existence.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, that's DFS for week 2. Appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing what lineups you actually come up with as we get a little closer here. So thanks for jumping on tonight, and Skull, right, D?
Skull. Hopefully they are 0-2 at the end of the night, and hopefully in future weeks I can follow the rules a little bit better. I'll structure my spreadsheets a little bit better.
Hey, every show needs a rebel. So
if I was running behind and everything like that, but that's
is that what it is? I don't remember. Something like that. Yeah.
Somebody toot that horn.
Yanni, give me one more.
Oh.